So, Ram, thank you for taking some time to join us today. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your experience, how you found your way to the United States, and what's kind of driven your desire to pursue permanent residency through the EB-5 program.
Hi, Sam. Yeah, happy to be here. So my name's Ram. I'm originally from India. I came to the United States first on my F1 visa to pursue my grad school. And after graduating with a master's degree, I got a job in the United States, and my employer sponsored H1B visa. And I've been on H1B visa ever since. Overall, I've been in the United States for about 10 years. Between that time, my employer did sponsor for a green card through the EB2 employment category, which was approved in May 2017. Ever since, I've been stuck in this EB2 queue, waiting for a green card.
You know, looking at that queue, what made you decide to pursue an EB-5 investment, even though you're already in line for a green card through EB2?
Yeah, so this is primarily happened during the pandemic, where I saw the EB2 numbers move forward in the visa bulletin, and that kind of intrigued me to realize, hey, let's go and look at when my number is going to come up in the EB2 category, and when I would be able to come out of the H1B visa, have a green card on hand. So at that time, I was primarily trying to make sense of the supply and demand. Supply in the number of visas that are issued for EB2 Indian nationals, and then demand on how much of people who are applying for EB2 visas from India. On the supply side, I was able to find that pre-COVID, USCIS was able to approve about 7,000 applicants in the year of 2015, and then it kind of the numbers started to go down, where in 2020 you could see about 2,500 applicants were approved. In the chart that's here, you could see that the 2021 and 2022 numbers are outliers because of COVID. There was spillover from family based applicants into the employment category, but since then that number has stabilized. And so from the supply side, you could think best case scenario, USCIS is going to go back to processing about 7,000 applicants a year. Worst case, it's going to be somewhere between 2,000 applicants per year. So we have the supply side, kind of a good idea on what happens on the supply side. Now, if you go on to the demand side of things, is where it gets a bit more challenging to figure out how many applicants are in front of a given priority date. So I worked with the I-140 numbers, because in the EB2 category, each applicant who's filing for a green card should have an I-140 approved before they go on to get their green card. And you get the green card only when your priority date becomes current. So you have a lot of people who are stuck with an approved I-140 applicants from India. The red line here shows the number of I-140 approvals that's happening per year. This doesn't account for duplicate entries. Like, for example, I have two I-140s approved because I switched employers and my second employer also sponsored green card, and I have an I-140 approved. The only reason I haven't been given a green card is because the priority date for Indian nationals in EB2 category is not current. Every year, there's about like 30,000-ish applicants who have their I-140 approved for Indian nationals. So taking that number, the second line from the bottom shows the running sum, which puts at about, like, if you have a priority date on, let's say, December 31st, 2021, there are about 200,000 I-140 applicants who have gotten their I-140s approved before you. The other intricate thing that I found out as I was kind of reading through all these materials was, like, your dependents do also count towards the numbers in the visa category. We have to account for dependents, and then we have to also account for duplicate entries and people who abandon I-140s. So just doing some rough calculation here, I did like 20% minus of the running sum to account for duplicates and for people who abandon their I-140 applicants. You could imagine this number could be different, but this is a quick back in the napkin math, which puts the running sum minus 20% at, for example, for 2021 at about 200,000 people with approved I-140 applications. And then accounting for dependents basically doubles that number. So that puts the total number of people who have I-140 approved as of December 31st, 2021 to be about 440K. Now, this gives you an idea on what the demand could be. This is not super accurate, but at least gives you a picture of, hey, what the demand is for different years. Now, we have a quick trend on what the supply was. We have a basic idea on what the demands could be. So the next slide would be just putting these numbers together. And if you go on to the next slide, you could see that the gray boxes are basically the running sum of I-140 approvals, including the dependents. And then we just plot different numbers, trying to make sense of like what would be the approval rate to hit a specific date. Right. So for example, like there are 3 lines. One is assuming that worst case scenario, the USCIS is processing about 5K visas per year. The second best case scenario is kind of doing about 7K per year. And then the third best scenario would be they're processing about 10K visas per year in the EB2 India queue. I personally, when I was evaluating when my number is going to come up, I lean towards looking at the 5K per year rather than the 10K per year number, just because we're past the COVID bump, we are right into normal processing years. So I expect USCIS numbers to be somewhere between 5 to 7K. And as someone who's on EB2 queue with the priority date of 2017 May, I am looking at best case scenario about 20 to 35 years to get a green card through the EB2 queue.
If we look at, let's say, someone who had a priority date of exactly December 31 in 2018, let's say, if we look at that center column there, and then we look at the 3 different processing levels, the 5, the 7.2, and the 10. So looking at this column here, so someone who had filed and had a priority date, EB2, at the end of 2018, based on these numbers, we could expect them to be eligible for a green card anywhere from 29 years, kind of at the best case, assuming consistent processing every year at 10,000 per year, and then worst case 59 years at the much lower 5,000 per year. So that range is pretty significant, 29 to 60 years for someone who has a priority date at the end of 2018, and then the same holds true for these other years. And so if we take that back to 2017, again, 23 to 46 years is a pretty wide range.
Exactly. And then even in this wide range, the lower number is not great, because for 2018, you're looking at 29 years. When 29 years is your best case scenario, there's a lot that goes into it. One is, you're expected to maintain employment status for 29 years in H-1B. You can't pursue other career paths because your I-140 is approved for a specific work level. So you need to maintain that work level. There comes the travel issues where you need to get your visa restamped each time you leave the US. So that is a lot to do and to make sure you're in the legal status in the United States for those 29 years.
Got it. And so, basically once you had a chance to really run the numbers and do this analysis for yourself, and you came out with, okay, if I don't do anything, I'm looking at 20 to 35 years of restricted travel, restricted employment, stress about visas and, constant employment, let's say, then you basically thought, okay, don't really want to do that. What else can I do to kind of, accelerate this process and get in a much shorter line? Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Exactly. So I started looking into this numbers in mid 2022, but as late 2022 rolled in, there was tech layoffs which are starting to happen, and that started an urgency in me to find out what are the other legal pathways that I have to a green card, given that I'm have to wait about 20 years at a minimum to get my green card through the EB2 queue. And when I was just kind of researching what are the ways, and to be honest, the only other way that I found was EB5. I have friends who have done EB1, but that required special skills and knowledge on a specific domain, and then there have to be leaders in those domain to pursue EB1. So based on my profile, it made more sense to pursue the EB5 line, where there is a queue for Indian nationals, but there are also dedicated visa numbers for specific categories within EB5.
Got it. That makes a lot more sense. And then you can eliminate the fear of potentially facing a layoff and knowing that you've adjusted status and you don't have to worry about leaving the country.
Exactly. So when I started looking into the EB5, the one benefit that came with the EB5 is the ability to adjust status once you file and then get an EAD and advanced travel permit. So that definitely takes some pressure off in terms of layoffs and the ability to easily switch jobs, and also accounts for international travel with the advanced parole.
We've covered, basically the reasoning why waiting for EB2 to become current is very daunting, and could be 20 to 35 years for your priority date, potentially 30 to 90 years for others depending on their priority dates as well. So now you've kind of come to the decision, okay, I want to do EB5. That's going to be the best option for me, to eliminate all the stress and unpredictability. Well, what was your next step once you had made that decision about what was the best path forward?
Yeah, so I spent most of 2022 researching about EB5 online. When I started with EB5 research, like just a simple Google search made it look like as if there's like hundreds of EB5 projects out there. But again, I had to spend some time understanding the specific immigration rules on EB5 and try to figure out what best suited my scenario, specifically for someone who's an Indian national, given that there's also a queue in EB5. I didn't want to just go from one queue to another never-ending queue. The main two areas, as I would say, the biggest decision-making areas as an EB5 investor is finding the right immigration attorney and then finding the right regional centers or the projects to work with. Coming back to kind of that first point on trying to find the immigration attorney, I've had some experience on the corporate immigration attorneys who have filed for EB2s for both me, my wife, who's also on the EB2 queue, and for my friends. One thing I kind of took away from that experience is I wanted to go with a smaller firm for the EB5 immigration for a couple of reasons, so that one, they could give a dedicated time and make sure they bring you along as an person who's going through this immigration process along through the application filing process, so that we get to understand what's happening, what kind of the rules that we need to follow for EB5, because going from an H1B or an EB2Q to an EB5 comes along its own set of rules. In the immigration attorney space, I was basically looking online, trying to narrow down to small firms who have been working on EB5. And I also came across Anaita in one of your other webinars. I think it's the Wahali project. So she did catch our eye in that webinar, and then just looking at other client testimonials, one from Siddharth in your other video, and then online, and also just talking to her even before we signed on with her, where she was able to walk us clearly through the EB5 process, definitely helped picking the right attorney.
Once you'd kind of completed the immigration attorney research and decided which attorney to hire, what was that process like? What types of documents did you need to assemble? How long did it take? How many hours, a day, for how long was that process until you were able to finish and get your file submitted?
Yeah, so I had done some of the groundwork in late 2022, because by late 2022 we were pretty sure like we were going to do EB5 in this half. So I had started collecting the source of funds, and also made sure that when the time came to sign on to a project, we were ready to go. So I guess when we met with Anita, our goal was to help her understand our case and where we are at in the process and what we were thinking. And so for us, we wanted to move really fast because we had a source of funds ready to go. We are almost narrowed down to a handful of projects that we were looking at. And then we were able to file from the day we made contact, within 2 weeks, we were able to file.
Got it. Okay, so fairly quickly, but you had done a lot of groundwork, kind of in anticipation of doing an application.
Exactly.
All right, so having just completed the process, what are some tips, some advice that you'd give to someone who's considering EB5 and is looking at a number of different attorneys? I know you mentioned you wanted to avoid kind of a larger firm on this application. Why was that the case? And specifically, what things were you really looking for in an EB5 attorney to help you through the process?
So a couple of main things that I was looking out for is someone who had processed like tens or hundreds of applicants in EB5, who had a good domain expertise in the EB5 space, and then also someone who could help us understand how the process is and make sure to guide us through, collecting the right set of documents, because there is a lot of documents, and then also make sure that them being on top of the game could give us more confidence in the filing that we will make to USCIS. So these are some things I look for when talking to multiple attorneys, specifically to avoid large firms. I don't have anything against the large firms, but I personally, for our case, wanted to make sure we had someone that we could really rely on and kind of handhold us throughout this case process, rather than just we upload the source documents and then days after they come back to us with, oh, here's your filing. That's the main reason that we wanted to go with a smaller firm.
So how was your experience working with Anita? What was good? What was not so good? And tell us about that experience.
Yeah. I think Sam, you introduced us to Anita, and then she took time to understand our case, and your immigration attorney becomes your partner through this process. So as an individual investor, you're working with your immigration attorney who's representing you to make sure you have all the right set of documents in place. So, just working with Anita, she was able to understand our case, figure out what needs to be done in terms of the source of documents, proofs, etc. And then just she being in regular contact with us for those 2 weeks really helped speed up our filing process, because there is a lot of documents that goes into the filing. I think ours is well close to about 6,000 pages. So you would want an attorney who's on top of their game and able to walk you through the filing, which definitely was our experience working with Anita.
Got it. Yeah, 6,000 pages. That's a lot of pages. All right, great. Let's chat a little bit now on the other piece of the equation that you mentioned earlier. So obviously, first step, interview a number of attorneys, find one that's a good fit, for your particular case, where your money's from, communication style, responsiveness, time zone. All those factors are important when selecting an EB5 attorney. And the attorney that may be the best fit for you is, could not be the best fit for, for someone else too, right? So it's definitely not a one size fits all situation. So now moving on the project side, obviously once you have all your documents in place to make an EB5 investment and everything's organized, then you've got to finalize which project and which regional center, that project is associated with to actually do the filing. So tell us a little bit about how you approach the project side of your research, and what were some of the main things that were important to you, and kind of how did you come to the decision after doing all that research to invest in the Twin Lakes Rural EB5 project?
Once you just do a Google search, you're gonna see as if there's like hundreds of EB5 projects out there to invest. Again, this comes to a specific need of what suits our profile. So for me, being an Indian national, knowing that there is already an EB5 queue for Indian nationals definitely made me realize that I needed to pay much more closer attention to the immigration component of the project. So with the new law being passed last year that there were dedicated visas allocated for specific categories, I found out that, we can't sign up for any rural project. It has to fit a certain criteria, especially it has to be a rural project. It has to be regional centers who had at least 10 years of experience where they have done this process end to end. Because from the day it takes to file for I-526 to the day that we remove the conditional green card and move on to a regular green card, it's going to take us a long time. So we're looking at projects or regional centers who have done that cycle at least once or multiple times. So that puts us at a 10-year period of runway for a regional center. So that narrowed it down immensely to only a handful of regional centers. And then that is the project component of, like, specifically for an Indian national, I had to look for a rural project just to avoid being stuck in the EB5 queue. So again, it's a handful of projects. And then as we were trying to evaluate the project, this is kind of the hard part for an individual EB5 investor. Like, personally, I am a software engineer for the last 10 years, and I don't have the financial skills to evaluate the project thoroughly end to end. So this is where me just trying to read through the subscription documents for each of those projects and trying to make sense of those projects and to see if, hey, is this a project that's where I'm comfortable with the risk variable that's associated with the project. So it's kind of like, starting from the top with all EB5 projects and narrowing it down to a handful of projects that fit our specific requirements, and then within those requirements, trying to make sense of the different projects and the variables that's associated with each project. And just by reading through these documents, we found that EB5AN Kotler project for Twin Lakes was definitely one of our top ones in the list. And then just researching more on this project by asking questions to Sam on, like, hey, these are things that in the subscription agreement that I don't understand. Can you help me understand? These are some questions that I posed to all regional centers, and then just trying to get more clarity through that helped me narrow down to the Twin Lakes project.
Obviously, you narrowed it down to that, handful of projects, some of which are, different parts of the country. What specifically about Twin Lakes compared to some of the others, that made it to that, final handful stood out to you?
Yeah, totally. So one is a real estate investment. Second, it is a single family home where the development happens as the requirements for new homes come up. It's not where, everything is complete, then we go and look at the supplies and demands equation. It is where the supply comes up as the demand comes up. That definitely got us interested, and the location definitely got us interested. So I would say, just looking at this project from a normal person who didn't have the financial needs, definitely put this in the top. And then digging in a little bit more on the subscription details, just seeing a senior loan that's funded where we have the financial muscle who have done the good deal of scrutiny on the project, where versus, as an individual investor, I was not able to provide the same level of scrutiny on the project.
I think you made two really good points there. One is on kind of supply demand with respect to the kind of underlying economics of the project. And then second, having an actual senior construction loan that's actually been signed and funded. So I want to dig a little more into those two pieces. So on the first piece, tell us a little bit more about what you mean by, supply demand, kind of more easily fitting together in this project versus, some of the other projects that you were looking at.
Yeah, totally. So between projects, I found some variations as I was reading through the subscription agreements for different RCs. Is that there are projects which do construction in one go and then look at the sale of the property, like a condo or an apartment or renting of an apartment, versus projects like Twin Lakes, where it is more of like a single family home that's being built as they get rid of an existing inventory, versus trying to build, let's say, all 1,500 homes in one go. That definitely was more interesting for us, and that fit with our risk profile compared to the other projects.
another project, let's say that was building, one very large building, whether it's a hotel or an apartment building, and then, could only really see how the project would perform after that building was done and actually available to rent to people. Is that kind of what you're alluding to in terms of the project, having that just more flexible supply demand equation?
Exactly. Being it a hotel or an apartment, it is more on future projections on like, hey, this gets completed and then the supply is gonna done, and then the demand side is gonna come into play. Versus here, it's more of like we get rid of inventory, we end up building new homes.
And then on the second point, the presence of a senior lender. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. What was compelling in your mind for that to be a component of the project that you wanted, and then how did that compare with some of the other projects that you looked at?
Yeah, so as I said, like I am not a financial professional and I don't have the skill sets to evaluate a project document in detail. So that's where I feel like the senior loan definitely comes in play, where someone had already done the homework, scrutinized the project, and have funded it. Honestly, this is my first EB5 project that I'm ever looking at, versus a bank who's funding these projects on every day as an everyday activity. They would have the right set of people to go and evaluate this project end to end. So just having that senior loan person and be part of that equation was definitely important for me. And then what kind of a percentage is that senior loan in the project? Is it that EB5 is a mandatory requirement that is needed to hit the project completion? Or is it more of like the EB5 is an extra supplement that's added in along with the senior loan, which is the case with the Twin Lakes project, which was made us more comfortable in our risk variables for this project.
Taking that situation with Twin Lakes and comparing it to some of the other projects, what didn't have a senior loan in place or were reliant on EB5 in order to complete the project? What was that distinction that you found?
Yeah, so we came across a broad range of projects from where they were still trying to find out senior loans, or sign on a senior loan entity in that project, versus where they already have a senior loan, but there's also this mandatory requirement of like, hey, I need to hit X number of dollars from EB5 investment for the project to succeed, versus the part where, oh, the senior loan percentage is not big enough, where there is high reliance on the EB5 funding, versus where the EB5 funding is good to have, but the project is already scrutinized and funded completely by the senior loan.
So obviously on the immigration side, having sufficient job creation is critical, right, to getting the permanent green card approved later on in the process. So how did the job creation factor into your decision, taking Twin Lakes versus some of the other projects that you were looking at?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is the part where there is an overlap between the projects, what the project provides for us an immigration benefit versus what we file. So we want a project that definitely meets the immigration requirements in terms of job creation. Again, a broad set of projects that we found was where the project is yet to be started or is in the early stages, versus project where there is construction already in place and there is already a sale of inventory that's happening and the job creation conditions have been met. We were more leaning towards or more comfortable with going towards projects which are already in progress and have met the job requirements, just because being through this journey of immigration for 10 years, we wanted to make sure we selected projects where the immigration benefit is already met, so that we remove one of the risk components in the project, which is the immigration requirement, and then that leaves us just the fund requirement where the funds is being at risk, and any projects we would not be able to guarantee a return of funds. So that narrows it down to just focusing on the risk variables of is the project going to complete and what are the possibility of funds being returned to us. knowing that a project has met the immigration benefit was like a hard requirement.
You mentioned earlier, about the importance of trying to avoid, a potential queue in EB5 with a rural project. Even though India is current at the moment for both rural and non-rural projects, can you talk a little bit about why, even though that's the case, and you could adjust status, you still, really wanted to do a rural project versus, a non-rural project?
So, as someone who's been through the EB2Q, to be honest, I never looked into the EB2 numbers. How long between the supply and demand? How long do we have given a priority date until mid of last year? I didn't want to make the same mistake going into EB5. And just looking at the number of applicants per year from USCIS for EB5 made me realize that there are countries where there's a high demand, or people from specific countries where there are high demand for EB5, like India, China. And with the new law being introduced in 2022, the rural category just became live in the last 6-ish months. So that made me more confident to say that, hey, this, even if there is a queue, there is also a specific set aside visa number for the rural category. And knowing that this category just existed in less than a year made me more comfortable in signing up for rural projects, so that we could realize the immigration benefit of EB5 sooner, and not get stuck in another queue for a couple of years.
Once the immigration attorney selection component is completed, then you move on to the project and the regional center. So we spoke a lot about the project individually. How important was, the regional center? Obviously, you mentioned that you only wanted to be with regional centers that had been, around for, at least 10 years, let's say. But outstanding that, what other aspects or factors and things were you considering in terms of, what you wanted the regional center to be for the project that you selected?
So outside the project variables, with specific regional centers, I was looking at, how easy are they talk to, how much time are they willing to spend to try to educate us as potential investors into understanding the project variables. Because as I said, I'm not a financial professional who could understand every details of the project. So I'm going to have a lot of questions. How much time is the regional center people taking time to explain those variables to me to help me understand a little bit better of their project? And just having those documentations and being quick responsive to my questions. Those are some of the variables.
Having just kind of gone through this process pretty recently, what general advice would you have for, another investor looking currently to make an EB5 investment in terms of the entire process overall? Is it a good fit for me? And then what should I be aware of as I start my research on making an investment?
The two main focus should be finding the right immigration attorney, and then second is finding the right project for your specific case and the risk variables you're comfortable with as an individual investor. I think the first part is easier to do compared to the second part of finding the right set of projects. As you read through the different subscription agreements for each project, I would encourage an individual investor to ask clarifying questions to that regional center, compare variables between the different projects. There are projects which look really good on paper, but just asking clarifying questions on what are the variables that could make this project fail? How is the demand that's been projected going to turn out to true? Just things like that would be super helpful, where you get more clarity on the project that's going to happen.
On the project side there, like how important was financial return to you when you were evaluating some of these different projects?
In terms of financial return, I would say I was pretty clear understanding the USCIS requirements that the funds are to be at risk. So, any project that promises 100% return for funds, run away from that. So I've kind of by default filtered that out. In terms of the funds being at risk and the possibility of the funds coming back, you could fit that into a set of risk variables like what is the successful probability this project is going to succeed, what is the supply side and the demand side, is the projected numbers for this project going to stay true, and then trying to get a scope of like between the projects, which one's more likely to succeed, and then that has a higher probability of returning funds.
Final question. Would you recommend your EB5 attorney and EB5AN to other investors considering EB5, and why? What was important in your experience that you'd want to highlight to other investors considering doing EB5?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would definitely recommend EB5, and specifically things that really was great working with you guys was the detailed docs and the agreements, and your ability to be really quick in responses to my questions, and also the educative videos that on the channel. Like, as someone who was looking at EB5 investment and trying to learn a lot more in the early stages, those videos definitely came in helpful in trying to up-level my knowledge on the whole EB5 process.
How about your immigration attorney? Would you recommend her to others considering EB5?
Yes, definitely. Anita is someone who takes the time to understand your specific case and then works with you to throughout the process. So I would definitely recommend Anita as an immigration attorney as well.
Thank you again, Ram, for taking time to share your experience. We really appreciate it, and as you can see, we just want to make sure that investors have the most amount of information possible, from which to research and increase their knowledge level about EB5, the various steps, different variables that are going to be more important to some investors than others, but just having all that information readily available in an easy to follow and understand format is really important. And part of that, of course, is hearing from other investors who have recently decided to do EB5 and getting to learn about what was important to them, and perhaps there are some parallels between one investor and another as they're considering projects.
Of course, happy to help.